Race is a strategy that allows you to answer short answer questions effectively and to your best ability. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of race and then demonstrate for you how you would use those for one of your short answer response questions for your summer reading over Refugee. Alright, so the first step of race is to restate the question. This is when you're going to turn the question, and we'll get into more details of what this looks like with the example, but I do encourage you to take notes and write down each step of race so that you can use it for future questions as well. The next step of race is to actually answer the question. When you answer the question, you want to make sure that you're answering all parts of the question. So sometimes you'll get questions that actually have two questions within them. When this is the case, you want to make sure that you answer each question in its own paragraph, so you'll go through the race process for each question. Next is C, cite your evidence. This is the most important part of the race strategy. This is where you prove that your answer is correct using evidence from the text. And so I provided some text evidence stems for you to help you when answering these race questions. The first one, the text states, and then you would put your quote from the text. Then according to the text, and again you would put your quote from the text, or on page, insert page number, the author states, and then you'd write your quote from the text. This helps you to make sure that you are 100% right in your answer and that you are strategically answering the question and backing it up. The last step of race is to explain and extend. This is where you explain how your evidence supports your answers using interpretation stems. So some examples of interpretation stems is where you would say, this proves blank, and then you'd offer your explanation and your analysis of how that text evidence helps you answer the question. Another one is, due to this, one can conclude that, insert your explanation and extension, or the author includes this to reveal blank. So here we have one of the short answer responses from your book study packet and your guided reading questions. So it says, discuss the reasons that Joseph, Isabel, and Mahmoud's families leave their homes. What are the situations in each of their lives that force them to flee? Okay, so there's question number one, and this is a two-part question. How are their situations similar, and how are they different? Okay, so we will first be stating why they had to flee, and then second, we're going to be comparing their different situations and circumstances. So here I've gone ahead and I've broken it into those two questions, but you have to keep in mind that we also have three characters. So this first question, we're actually going to have to answer 3 times. So by the time you're all said and done with this short answer response, you will have 4 paragraphs and 4 times where you have used the race short answer response strategy. So here you'll see that the first question is, what are the situations that force blank? And this is where you're going to pick one of the characters and his or her family to flee, and then the country that they are fleeing, having to leave. Then after you've done that for all 3 characters, you will answer the final question, how are the character situations similar and different? Alright, so the first part of race is to restate the question. So here I filled in my question using Isabel. What are the situations that force Isabel and her family to flee Cuba? So first we need to restate that question. Here we're going to turn the question into a statement. So I'll say, Isabel and her family are forced to flee Cuba. Alright, so I've gotten rid of the questions words of what are, and I flipped that into a statement. The next part is a very important part of the race strategy, and this is where you're answering the question. So notice I didn't start a new sentence because I'm using because to conjoin these two parts. So now I'm adding my answer, my explanation. Before I did this, I went ahead and I looked through the book for some text evidence to make sure that I was getting on the right track with my answer, and we'll get to that text evidence in a minute. But I said that Isabel and her family are forced to flee Cuba because her father defies Fidel Castro, the dictator of Cuba, by participating in riots, which are started because of a lack of food and government support. So now, the next important part, I have to prove that I'm right, and I'm going to do that by citing text evidence. So I looked through my book, and I actually found multiple places in the book where it talks about why they need to leave. But the quote that I really liked and that I landed on because I felt like it encompassed multiple ideas was on page 28. And this is right in the middle of the riot. So we get the information about the riot, but we also get important information about how the riot and the government affects Isabel and her family. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little passage from that, and then I'll show you how I narrowed down. So on page 28, it says, the policeman's eyes flashed from anger to surprise, and then back to anger. He reared back again to hit Isabel, and she flinched. But the blow never came. Another policeman had caught his arm. Isabel blinked. She recognized the new policeman. He was Luis Castillo, Ivan's older brother. What do you think you're doing? The older policeman barked. Luis didn't have time to answer. A whistle blew. The police were being summoned elsewhere. The angry cop yanked his arm free from Luis and pointed the nightstick at Poppy. I saw what you did, he said. I'll find you again. When all this is over, I'll find you and arrest you, and they'll send you away for good. So that last part right there shows me that Poppy and the policeman are having conflict during the riot, and then it also tells me why her father is having to leave Cuba because he's involved in this conflict, and he's going to be arrested and sent to prison for life if him and his family do not flee. So there, that gives me the information that I need to support my answer that Poppy is involved in a riot, and that is why they have to leave due to the government of Cuba. Finally, I need to do that explanation. I need to explain my answer and extend for the readers how I connected my answer and my text evidence and how it all relates together and fully answers my question. So, this is where I explained the connection between the dictator, the riots, her father, and having to leave. So, due to this, one can conclude, that's our interpretation stem, that Isabel and her family decide to leave Cuba. So Poppy is not forced away to prison for his participation in the riot. Okay? And so that's how I get to my answer, and I prove it with my text evidence and my explanation. Now, one last thing that I forgot to point you to when I was including my text evidence is right here. You'll notice that in parentheses, after the quote, I put my page number so that I can easily go back and find in the text where I found my answer, and then I can get more evidence from that if I need to. So now that we've gone through the race strategy together, it's your turn to complete this for the different characters and then answer the second part of the question. How are the character situations similar and different? So, first, you'll do each character. So you'll say, what are the situations that forced Joseph and his family to flee Germany? And then, what are the situations that forced Muhammad and his family to flee Syria? And you'll answer that. You'll do a paragraph for each of those from start to finish with RACE. And then you'll do that for the last one. So when it's all said and done, you'll have 4 total paragraphs for this one question that have fully answered the question to the best of your ability with a rock star answer.